If women are equal in the eyes of God, why are we not equal in the eyes of men? Zaina Anwar, Sisters in Islam.
It's time, past time really, that we gather as an interfaith community to state, unequivocally, that equality for women shouldn't stop at the doors of our churches, shrines, synagogues, and mosques. Lori Winder, Ordained Women.
The gospel of Jesus Christ has at its center the ending of domination of every kind. For some Christians, to use the gospel to compromise the human rights of women and others borders on the obscene. Their rights-denying actions must be exposed for what they are. Formal policies for the retention and augmenting of power by those men who already have it. The ethic of Jesus Christ proclaims the radical equality of human value. The ending of the subordination of women, and of all who are dominated, is critical to the building of the reign of God on earth as it is in heaven. Dr. Allison Bowden, Dean of Religious Life, Princeton University.
Gender analysis is not a threat to the church, but a tool that can enable us to root out those aspects in our faith traditions that perpetuate the oppression, exclusion, and marginalization of women. Perhaps some of us feel that things should be left alone, but the rising incidence of violence against women is a clear sign that all is not well, that gender inequality is not a harmless practice that will disappear. Gender inequality needs to be seen for what it really is, a crime against humanity and a seat for the struggle for justice. That struggle needs to happen within the church. Women's rights are human rights. Nantando Hedeby, Institute for Contextual Theology, Durban, South Africa.
The principle of treating others the same way one would like to be treated is echoed in at least 12 religions of the world. Others transcend gender, race, class, sexual orientation, or caste. In African communitarian spirituality, this is well expressed in the Ubuntu religious and ethical ideal of, I am because you are, and since we are, therefore I am, a mandate based on the reality of our being interconnected and interdependent. Fulata Moyo, World Council of Churches.
We have to work for a church community that seriously considers the needs and voices of the most oppressed, the least powerful, the people we have hurt the most. Jacqueline Small, Women's Alliance for Theology.
It's time for all people of faith to be outraged. It's time for our Christian leaders to stand up and say that women, made in the very image of God, deserve better. And it's time for us in the faith community to acknowledge our complicity in a culture that too often not only remains silent, but also can propagate a false theology of power and dominance. There is a growing understanding that women must be central to shaping solutions. Jim Wallace, Sojourners Magazine.
The place of religion in our societies and in many states today, particularly in the Middle East, is the determining issue for our future. The issue of women's rights is the main battleground for determining the identity of a nation. If we protect women's rights, we get everything right. If we do not protect women's rights, everything will disintegrate. We have to settle the place of religion in our societies and discuss it without fear of intimidation. Mona Rishmawi, Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights.
When women are denied equitable leadership positions in their faith, it is part of a larger culture of sexism that not only silences women's vocations and voices, but implicitly gives permission to the rest of the world to discriminate against women. Kate McElwee, the Women's Ordination Conference.
We call on all religious leaders throughout the world to take a firm stand and collectively commit to promoting the basic rights of girls and women. This will constitute one of the most important movements in religious history. It is a responsibility of any sincere religious leader who seeks to make this world a better place to live. Sheikh Mohammed Sharif Diop, Islamic rights specialist.
In August of 2013, Pope Francis said, Faith and violence are incompatible. Likewise, we assert that faith and gender inequality are incompatible, and yet inequality within our faith communities persists. Why do women remain in religious institutions that marginalize us? There are many reasons: belief, conviction, the desire to serve, cultural identity, family ties, political and societal influences, to name just a few. But religion not only affects those of us who claim denominational affiliation, it significantly impacts our world. Recognizing this, the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development sponsored a multi-country study from 2007 through 2009 to look at religion, politics, and gender equality. Religion, the UN study demonstrates, is part of the fabric of our world and significantly impacts the rights of women. If we care about a just society, we all have a stake in whether or not our religious communities help liberate or subordinate women. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated it well. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And so we have a choice. We can either perpetuate inequality through silence and inaction, or we can work together for a more just, inclusive, and equitable world. The Elders is one group doing just that. As international political and cultural leaders, the Elders were challenged by Nelson Mandela to speak truth to power and use their collective experience and influence in the service of peace, justice, and human rights. Chair Kofi Annan identified their goals. Among them were a just and inclusive global community and freedom from fear. Equality, inclusiveness in a just society isn't about sameness. It's about open access and opportunity for all, and the ability to exercise agency without fear of retribution or violence. Again, gender equity, gender justice is about access, opportunity, and agency for all, without fear of retribution or violence. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter writes about his work with the Elders in his book, A Call to Action: Women, Religion, Violence, and Power. He explains, "We had an extensive debate when I presented my concerns about the adverse impact of religious beliefs on women's rights to this group of fellow leaders and advisors, because they represent practicing Protestants, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, and Hindus, and their faiths have different policies about the status of women. We finally decided to draw particular attention to the role of religious and traditional leaders in obstructing the campaign for equality and human rights. The resulting statement asserts, the justification of discrimination against women and girls on grounds of religion or tradition, as if it were prescribed by a higher authority, is unacceptable." We've learned through such popular books as Half the Sky and the work of the Elders, the United Nations, and many scholars and human rights organizations that marginalizing the talents and abilities of women in any setting, secular or religious, is simply self-defeating. Equal in Faith asks, if we increasingly refuse to tolerate the inequitable treatment of women in our secular institutions, why then do we so readily accept it in our religious communities? We join together as an interfaith community to assert that all will benefit when women pray, speak, teach, bless, lead, and serve their congregations as priests, pastors, chaplains, preachers, rabbis, and imams. Some accuse women of being power-hungry if they advocate for women's full inclusion in their faith traditions, treating spiritual power as if it were in short supply and something to be hoarded rather than shared. What they fail to acknowledge is that there is no shame, nor are there accusations of improper ambition attached to men who aspire to ordination, pastoral leadership, the opportunity to preach and lead others in prayer, or stand and pray in holy places. Neither should there be for women. Throughout much of history, said Dr. Ziba Mir Hosseini, Men have defined religious norms and texts, and women's voices were silenced. It is time for women to reclaim their religion. According to the United Nations study, women from South America to sub-Saharan Africa and beyond, despite their subordination to a hierarchical male order, are acting to change the structures of the churches and to incorporate women's demands for equality and autonomy, and voice and influence and freedom from sexual discrimination and violence. Across the world religions, writes religious scholar Christine Igudorf, feminists are clear that the dignity and welfare of women within religions and within their larger communities requires the development of women clergy, judges, and religious scholars. Religion should be more than simply a source of comfort for women resisting degradation and violence aimed at them. It should be, and could be, a support for women liberating themselves from all kinds of violence against women. But in order for religion to be a source of liberation, it must develop the ability to critically examine its history and development and the impact that it has had on the lives of girls and women who continue to look to religion for hope and support. We have much to grapple with as an interfaith community. The 2015 theme for Women's History Month is Making It Happen. As people of faith, how can we make it happen? How can we help one another move the work for gender justice forward? Our hope is that interfaith events like the Equal in Faith Fast for Gender Justice in Religion will underscore our belief in the ability of religion to liberate rather than subjugate women. We also hope to further ignite a conversation about maintaining what we value in our religious traditions while transforming them, and by extension the world we all inhabit, into a more inclusive and equitable global community. Let's make it happen.